Hello friends. Have you ever had one of those quiet nights where you're lying in bed, everything's still, and yet something inside feels restless? It's not pain exactly. It's not sadness either. It's more like this low, steady hum of unease. Your body feels drained, maybe even a little hollow. And while no one says it out loud, deep down you wonder, am I doing something that's taking more than it's giving? For a lot of men over 55, that question starts showing up more and more often, especially around habits we don't usually talk about openly, like masturbation. Now, let's pause right here because this conversation isn't about shame. It's not about judgment. And it's definitely not about preaching. It's about honesty, healing, and moving toward the kind of strength that feels calm, centered, and whole again. You see, what you do with your body is personal. It always has been. But what many of us don't realize is that after a certain age, the relationship we have with our body starts to change. What used to feel like a release or a way to ease stress might slowly turn into a habit that no longer serves us, especially when it becomes too frequent or automatic, something we turn to out of boredom, loneliness, or emotional numbness, rather than real connection. And here's where the prostate quietly enters the story. That little gland about the size of a walnut sits just below your bladder. It plays a big role in your reproductive system, producing fluid for semen, but it's also deeply connected to your sense of vitality. When we overstimulate it through frequent ejaculation, particularly without the deeper connection that intimacy brings, it can start to show signs of strain. Not just physically but emotionally too. Some men start noticing a dull ache in the pelvic region. Others feel a lingering fatigue that no nap seems to fix. And then there's that emotional weight that settles in, the kind that makes you feel less present, less grounded, like you're walking through life with the volume turned down. So what's happening? Well, as we age, our body's ability to recover shifts. Hormonal levels decline gradually. Our tissues become more sensitive. And the nervous system, especially when overloaded with quick dopamine hits, starts to tire out. Masturbation in moderation isn't the enemy. But when it becomes excessive, especially after 55, it can quietly chip away at our emotional balance, energy levels, and even confidence. And the truth is, many men don't realize it's happening until they feel empty and don't know why. But here's the good news. This isn't about quitting something cold turkey or trying to fight your own nature. It's about tuning in. It's about healing step by step and finding new rhythms that bring your body and mind back into harmony. One of the first things that can really help is becoming aware of what triggers the urge. Not in a shameful way, but in a curious, honest way. Ask yourself, when do I feel it most? Is it when I'm lonely, bored, anxious? Noticing these patterns gently, not judging them, can be incredibly powerful. It's like turning on a light in a room you've always walked through in the dark. Once you've done that, a simple practice can help break the loop. Replace the habit with something nourishing. For example, when the urge shows up, not from desire but from routine, step outside for a walk instead. Feel the breeze on your skin. Listen to the sound of the birds. I know it sounds simple, but there's something deeply grounding about connecting to your senses. You're shifting from escaping your body to returning to it. And here's something else that might surprise you. Even short moments of stillness, just 5 or 10 minutes a day, can make a real difference. Sitting quietly, breathing deeply, letting your nervous system settle. It doesn't have to be meditation in the traditional sense. Just a pause, a chance to come back to yourself. Many men find that once they start doing this, the urges lose their grip. Not because the body doesn't want release, but because the soul is finally being heard. When you begin tuning into those emotional needs, something interesting starts to shift. You might find old feelings bubbling up, things you've pushed down or brushed aside. Loneliness, regret, even grief. And that's okay. It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign you're healing. It means you're no longer trying to silence your feelings with quick fixes, but instead you're learning to listen and respond. And in doing so, your body begins to follow your lead. That aching sense of emptiness? It starts to lift. The fog clears. And in its place, something steadier begins to grow. Presence, clarity, peace. You may even begin to notice that your energy, once scattered, is now gathering in new ways. You're more focused, more alive, more in control, not from force but from understanding. Because the truth is, your body still wants to feel good. It still wants to be touched, appreciated, and honored. But the way that happens can evolve. It can become more mindful, more meaningful, more deeply connected to who you really are now, not who you were 20 years ago. There's something remarkable that happens when a man begins living with more awareness. You start to notice the small things again, the morning light through the window, the way your breath feels when you really take it in, the sound of your own footsteps on a quiet street. And as your senses wake up, so does your strength. It's in this kind of presence that the second shift begins, one that can genuinely transform your relationship with your body and your prostate. It starts with honoring rhythm. You see, the male body has cycles. Times when energy flows outward, and times when it needs to come back in. But when masturbation becomes too frequent, especially in response to emotional emptiness, it disrupts those cycles. The body doesn't get the time it needs to replenish, to regenerate, to hold on to the energy that fuels your vitality. So one practical healing approach is to slow the rhythm down, not by force or guilt, but by making space for other forms of release. Gentle movement helps a great deal here. Things like stretching your back out in the morning, rotating your hips, even just standing in the sunlight with your arms stretched wide. These movements may not seem directly related to your prostate, but they are. They help restore energy flow in your pelvic area. They tell your nervous system, I'm safe, I'm grounded, I don't need to escape. This kind of movement, done regularly, reduces the internal tension that often leads to compulsive habits. It also reconnects you with your core, not just physically but emotionally, because when you start treating your lower body as sacred rather than mechanical, everything changes. It stops being a place of mindless release and becomes a center of strength and intuition again. And that naturally leads to the next part of this healing process, reconnecting with purpose. It may sound unrelated, but hear me out. So many men over 55 carry a quiet question deep inside, do I still matter? It's not about career or finances. It's about inner fire, about feeling useful, valuable, needed. And when that fire dims, we often reach for temporary distractions. But what if the answer isn't distraction, but redirection? Simple acts of purpose can reignite the part of you that feels alive without needing escape. Maybe it's fixing something around the house, writing a letter to a friend, mentoring someone younger, gardening, reading a book that stirs your spirit. The key isn't what you do, it's that you do it with intention, with heart. When a man feels purposeful, even in small ways, the need to chase momentary highs begins to fade. The body no longer aches for release, it begins to rest in contentment. And yes, there will still be urges. That's natural. You're human. You're alive. But the difference is, those urges don't control you anymore. You've started to step into the driver's seat. You've started asking deeper questions. And your body responds to that leadership. One thing many men find helpful is setting soft boundaries for themselves, not hard rules that trigger rebellion, but gentle agreements that reflect care. For example, maybe you decide to let a full day or two pass before indulging in release. Not because you're punishing yourself, but because you're learning to honor your energy. You're choosing to wait for a moment that feels less like habit and more like genuine desire. That small shift makes a world of difference. It turns a routine into a choice. It transforms a craving into an act of self-respect. And here's the beautiful thing, the prostate responds. It really does. That dull pressure? It lessens. That restless itch behind your ribs? It starts to ease. Your pelvic floor muscles begin to relax instead of tighten. And over time, your energy, your real energy, comes back. Not the jittery buzz of dopamine spikes, but the grounded strength of a man at peace in his own skin. You might notice you sleep deeper. Think clearer. Even walk differently, more upright, more open-chested, like the weight you didn't realize you were carrying is finally loosening its grip. And what's more, you begin to relate differently to others. You listen more, laugh easier. You stop reaching for your phone or rushing through the day. You show up, and people feel it. Because you're not hiding behind habits anymore, you're living from presence. This isn't about giving up pleasure. It's about upgrading it, deepening it, aligning it with who you are now, not the man you were at 25 chasing the next release, but the man you've grown into. The man who understands that real fulfillment doesn't come from the surface. It comes from depth, from honesty, from care. And when that sense of clarity begins to grow, the next shift becomes even more natural. Because your body, your mind, and your emotions are starting to sync again. The noise quiets down, the cravings soften. And in their place, you discover something far more powerful, Peace. Not the kind of peace that's passive or dull, but the kind that lets you walk through the world with your head high and your heart steady. There's a quiet strength that comes with letting go of what no longer serves you. It doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It just settles in, like a calm lake after the wind stops stirring the surface. That's the kind of strength that begins to return when you start making peace with your body and your needs, instead of fighting or feeding them without thought. And perhaps the most profound shift in this journey is the one that happens in the mind. Because all the practices, the breath work, the walking, the stillness, the purpose, they begin to reshape the way you think about yourself. And that reshaping is where real healing begins. It starts with the simple realization: you are not broken. You never were. Whatever habits you've leaned on, whatever coping you've done, it was just your way of trying to feel better, to feel something, to feel safe. And now you're choosing something different. Not because you have to, but because you want to feel more alive. One of the most powerful ways to support your prostate and your emotional balance is to practice self-forgiveness. It might sound like a soft word, maybe even unnecessary, but it's foundational. So many men carry silent shame. Not just about sexuality, but about aging, about slowing down, about losing things they once thought defined them. But the truth is, aging isn't about loss. It's about refinement. It's about distilling what matters, letting go of the noise, and living more honestly. When you begin to forgive yourself, not for being human, but for being hard on yourself for being human, something incredible happens. The tension leaves your shoulders. The guilt stops echoing. And you begin to look in the mirror not with judgment, but with compassion. You see a man who's walked a long road. A man who's still here. Still learning. Still choosing growth. That recognition alone can release more pressure from the body than any treatment ever could. And from that place of self-kindness, your body starts to listen. Your prostate, your nerves, your energy, they all begin to follow that signal of safety. Healing isn't just about reducing a habit. It's about becoming whole again. And wholeness feels like ease, like a quiet mind, like being able to sit with yourself and feel okay, maybe even proud of where you are. You might be wondering if it's too late. Too late to change. Too late to feel better. Too late to live with purpose and calm and connection again. But let me tell you this, if you're hearing these words, it's not too late. Because something in you already wants better. Something in you is awake enough to care. And that's everything. So if today all you do is pause for a few seconds longer, if all you do is notice when a habit kicks in and choose to wait a few minutes instead of jumping into it, if all you do is breathe, walk, or place a hand on your chest and say, "I'm okay," that's a win. That's momentum. That's healing in action. Because healing doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. The beautiful truth is, men over 55 have a gift that younger men don't. The gift of perspective, of patience, of wisdom. You've seen life. You've lived through heartbreak and hope, quiet mornings and loud nights. You felt loss. You found strength. And now you get to turn all of that into fuel, not for reaction but for reflection. For calm, for peace, for depth. So no, this isn't about quitting anything cold. This is about returning. Returning to your own center, to your own body, to your own truth. You're not too old. You're not too late. You're not alone. You're a man still capable of strength, clarity, and love. And you deserve to live with a body that feels light, a mind that feels steady, and a heart that feels whole. So take that next small step. Whatever it is, let it come from kindness, not pressure. Let it come from the part of you that wants to feel truly alive, not just for a moment, but for the rest of your life. If this conversation resonated with you in any way, if something in you feels seen or a little more hopeful, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. Let's create a space where men over 55 can speak openly, support each other, and grow stronger together. And if you'd like more videos that speak to your journey, your health, your peace, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay connected. Here's to living with strength, peace, and purpose, no matter what age you are.